Self-reflection. Like, I spent the majority of my career traveling, like being on the road. And so I was very seldom home, and, my wife is an amazing, home caretaker. And, she worked very hard to give us a house that's extremely comfortable, right? The problem is I was almost never home to enjoy it. So it's been amazing to just really be here with moments of self-reflection and just relaxing, finding peace. We always cook, like that's always been our thing, right? Like we spend a lot of shared time cooking here. We just got a new grill from Traeger. And so that's gonna be basically what we do from here on out, is just try to find different things that we can put on the grill. But I think for the most part, music, right? Like music's been a big part of how everybody's been dealing with this. Thank God for people like D-Nice, Ninth Wonder, Static Selector, DJs who've been working overtime to entertain the people and share their love of music with us. It's made for some really fun nights. Even I took up DJing for a while with Club Trill. Music, for the most part, has been the medium that many of us have been using to like fill time, put ourselves at ease, just kind of relax and reflect on everything. For me, it's been a couple of things. Predominantly, I can't believe it took me this long, but I found Khruangbin this year. You know what I'm saying? And just really going through their catalog and all their live performances and kind of following their track. It's been amazing. They're an amazing band, three-piece band, for those of you that don't know. Laura, Mark, and Beans for Beans and Cornbread. And I mean, it's really hard for me to classify the music, but it's really good. It's really soothing. It's peaceful. It's perfect background music. It doesn't really get in the way or interfere with anything. So that's been a big addition to me as far as my music playlists and whatnot. It's been fun watching Griselda, right, kind of take off over the last year and watch them kind of find their own individual spaces as well as the group aesthetic. It's been amazing to really watch what they've been able to accomplish this year in music. G Herbo, right? I'm really tuned in with G Herbo. I love the way he approaches it. He is everything that young artists are, but he's a little different though, right? He's a little different in his approach. And I like that. I like that a lot. My guilty pleasure this year has been really the one song that I find myself just kind of going to every now and then for no reason has been King Chip, Interior Crocodile Alligator, right? Which is super short, not even a really long song, but I love it. I love the song. But it's been a really good year for music for me. I've been enjoying the output by a lot of people. Obviously, Lil Baby had a great year in spite of things. The Baby had a good year in spite of his public trauma. Right now, obviously in my house, because we're both Megan Thee Stallion fans, that's kind of where we are right now with good news. Just trying to keep my ear to the street with a lot of different stuff that's going right now. It's been a great year for Houston. Obviously, Travis is always on the forefront of stuff, but Don Toliver had some really, really good momentum going with him coming off the Jack Boys album into his own solo album. I really hate that with COVID, he didn't get to go on the road because he was going to be the opening act for the Weeknd this year, which would have been an amazing opportunity for him as an artist to really travel the world and to be put on that kind of stage, because obviously the Weeknd is one of the biggest artists in the world. So opening up for an act like that can put you right in front of the people that you need to be in front of in order to grow your fan base and grow your movement. But I think for me, I mean, Shots Fired for me probably is the song, because diss tracks are prevalent in hip hop, right? Diss tracks, dudes dissing dudes and girls dissing girls. I can't remember many instances outside of like Roxanne's Revenge where the girl is like dissing dudes on a rap record. Like you don't really see that often nowadays. But it was a hell of a way to start an album off. I'll be honest, it's a hell of a way to start the album off. I think it's amazing, first of all, that, a new young female artist has the frame of reference to go back and reach through hip hop to grab these monumental moments, right? Like Boys in the Hood is a big moment in hip hop, right? That's where we really start to understand exactly what the streets of LA are all about. If you don't go to LA, you don't have family or friends in LA, right? So it gives you a very good idea of what's happening on the West Coast. And then obviously Who Shot Ya is one of the pivotal moments in hip hop history from one of our, top 3 best lyricists ever. It's very ambitious to make a song like that, to kind of go with that, but I feel like she did good enough, right? I feel like the level of expectation for her on that record is kind of on par for the chorus. Certain artists would be held to a higher regard if they touch those records, right? But I think for what she was trying to do, she really was trying to not necessarily replicate the record, but give you an idea of where she's going with the content. So as soon as you hear that song, you already know what we're about to do, and the title is there itself. But I think she did a good job. I think, Megan's a rapper, right? Like Megan does all the dancing. She wears the risque outfits and all of that kind of stuff. I get it. But outside of all of that, you can't really question Megan's lyrical ability, So I think she did a good job. She does a good job in songwriting overall. She has her flow. She's locked in with her flow, but she also has her subject matter, and she's locked in with that. And she's found a way to make both of them work, right? To be sexy and lyrical at the same time. It's amazing. The beat was crazy, right? Those pianos, you know what I'm saying? And then just the whole idea of the timing, I think, from that moment was crazy, because we're still like trying to grasp the concept of Tupac being shot. And then Biggie drops this song, Who Shot Ya? And it just draws a lot of correlation between those two people, right? I feel like if Biggie, to be honest, like looking back, if Biggie hadn't maybe done that record, things might have ended differently with them, right? But I mean, at that point there, I don't know if there's really any going back for that friendship. But it was a very, very strange time in hip hop to see like this dynamic East Coast figure speaking on what we perceive to be the shooting of this dynamic West Coast figure, right? Who for all intents and purposes, Tupac is from, it's seen as a representative of the West Coast, but Tupac's kind of for everybody as well. It's just the lines were drawn so deeply in the sand at that moment, but it was a ballsy move for Biggie, So me meeting Biggie was on his promo tour for the first album. So this is when, this is Juicy, basically. He's on the promotional tour for Juicy. And it's him and Craig Mack, right? So at the time, Flavor in Your Ear is actually a bigger record than Juicy is. Juicy eventually passes it and eclipses it, right? But as far as just singles, because Flavor in Your Ear is big as a record, but then it kind of goes even bigger with the remix or whatever. But no, this is still very early in the career of Biggie Smalls. Like he's still, just now dealing with the idea that there's a white rapper named Biggie Smalls, right? And, he has to move over to the Notorious B.I.G. kind of a thing. But I mean, he was always Biggie Smalls to us. It doesn't matter who owned that name. I've just been trying to lead by example. You know what I mean? So you don't want to get out there and tell people to protect themselves from the virus and be smart about how they move. And then people see you in compromising positions, right? So you got to really practice what you preach in these moments, right? But I try to also keep the base of people that I have influence with updated about the numbers, about the severity, right? Positivity rates, mortality rates for all this kind of stuff in real time. And people know that when I speak about something I care about, I'm not just saying it to say it, right? Just to be part of a movement or whatever. Like I never embrace the whole 5G thing. I don't get into these little conspiracies or whatever. I try to give people facts. And if people don't want to accept it, that's on them, right? But I'm trying to make sure as an OG out here that I'm saying and doing what needs to be said and done in these moments. And people can either, embrace it or reject it. It's really on them. But I feel like a lot of people at some point put their own selfish wants, right, before everything else. So, and I understand, like, there's a lot of people who've had to go through COVID by themselves at home, and it's nerve-wracking, right? Because that's not what their life was at all. Their life was built around socializing and communing with people in public places, and that's a very human thing, right? I'm not saying they're different from people, but I mean, you look at certain people and they're literally in this very small apartment, right? They're on maybe the 3rd or 4th floor. In New York, it could be the 10th, 12th floor. They don't have a balcony, right? So like even me, for example, like even though we can't, when COVID first started, you couldn't really leave the house. I have a front yard, right? I have a backyard with a porch that we can go and sit out and relax and listen to music or cook food like we've been doing lately and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily inside, right? Separated from people. But there are a lot of people whose lives consist of that, of them being basically, who are basically stuck in their apartments, right? And they can't go out and see the people they want to see and go the places they want to go, eat the food they want to eat, dance, all that kind of stuff. And for some people, that's a priority in their lives, right? And so they're willing to go out and chance it for that opportunity. For other people, this is where I talk about, like, there's a lot of violence, right? That's happening right now because people are frustrated. People don't have money. There's no opportunities for people. And so you already have the basic criminal element that already exists, but now you have people who are determined to provide for themselves and their families no matter what. So they're taking chances, penitentiary chances that they wouldn't normally take, right? Trying to rob somebody in the spur of the moment. There's been a lot of that lately, right? People seeing an opportunity to take something from someone and it's not necessarily their thing, but they don't have. And so they're going to do what they need to do to get what they need for themselves and the people they love. But yeah, and so, and we're in the holiday season right now, which is always a very real time of year, right? Like there's a lot of purse snatching and catching, robbing people at cars and stuff like that, and taking bags out of back seats and all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of people that they shop from store to store, right? So they'll go in one store, they'll buy this, then they'll go to another store, they'll buy that. And so people will see them leaving one store, follow them to the next store as soon as they leave the car and go in and take what they bought from the previous store, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just a very, serious time in America right now. And so you want to keep people aware of that kind of stuff as well. But people are more concerned with the threat that they could see and they can feel than one that they can't see or feel, right? So you look at Chicago and young people in Chicago, they're being shot at and murdered at a high rate, right? So for them, if you try to tell them to avoid, COVID, like a virus or a flu, they're like, man, I'm trying to avoid the ops. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to avoid, people spinning the block, that kind of stuff, So it's like, what am I really going to be afraid of? This thing that I may catch, right? That even if I do catch, maybe I even get it asymptomatically. I don't even get sick from it. Or do I avoid this real threat, this real physical threat that's apparent that I know is there, right? I know for a fact it's there. And so there's a balance that people are going through, right? Between what they feel they want and what they feel they need in this time. And so I try to, impress upon people what the reality is about this situation. But if people have active threats against them, active physical threats against them, I mean, they're going to do what they need to do in the moment. And if that means going outside in a pandemic, right, because they don't want to just be like a sitting target or something, there's a lot of different excuses I'm hearing for why people are active in the streets right now. But the volatility is high. I can definitely tell you that there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of tension in the streets of America, and people are gravitating to crime and violence in these moments. There's an uptick of not just gang violence in America, there's an uptick of road rage violence in America. There's a huge increase in domestic assaults in America, right? Because a lot of couples are spending more time with each other than they would normally spend. They're finding out things they maybe didn't know about the other person, and they're really just in communion with people that they don't want to be around that much, right? And we have jobs and school and sporting events and concerts, things that we can go to and occupy our time instead of being around people that we necessarily don't want to be around for extended periods of time. But we don't have that anymore, so parents are, trying to figure out how to engage their children, right? Husbands are trying to figure out how to get along with their wives, right? And vice versa. So there's a lot of different dynamics that people are dealing with in this moment. It doesn't really matter what your station in life is, where you live, what your community is based on. Everybody has their respective issues that offer complications to their everyday life based off COVID. And you just try to manage it the best way you can. There are still many people in America who don't have people in their immediate circle who are dealing with COVID, right? We're all dealing with the ramifications of the virus in this country, but there are still a lot of people who don't have someone close to them that's been affected by the disease. For us, our son and his wife both contracted it right at the time where they were giving birth to a new child. So it was like the day of the birth, my son found out he was infected. The day after the birth, my daughter-in-law found out she was infected. So the baby couldn't go home with them. They had to go in quarantine when they left the hospital. So the baby came home with me and my wife for a week and then went with my daughter-in-law's parents for a week. So just the immediate understanding that as much as I would love for them to spend this time with their child, it's just not safe, right? Like the baby has to come from, away out of that environment because we don't know how disease like that can affect a newborn child, right? And so there was dealing with that, and that's more emotional, right, than anything. But the parents understood it. They weren't crazy about it, but they understand it because the last thing they want to do is hurt their beautiful baby girl, right? On the other side of it, my father had it, my aunt had it as well. They came through pretty good. Everyone in my immediate vicinity, with the exception of one person, weathered the storm fairly well. Now, my brother's wife, her mother, who was an older woman, her mother was already in her 90s. She contracted the disease, and unfortunately, she passed away from COVID. And so for them, it was a lot more emotionally taxing. My niece and nephews, they, lost their grandmother. My sister-in-law lost her mother. And so that was a lot more emotionally taxing than some of these other situations. And it's just in these moments where you want to make sure that you're there for people emotionally, right? Give people an ear to speak on, a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, but we were very happy and lucky in that moment that we were not infected and we were able to provide a safe environment for our granddaughter to be in those times. But it really makes you think, like this is real. And I felt the need, not necessarily, I very seldom put my family's business out there, but I felt it was important to let people know that trust me, whereas they may not trust the news, they may not trust social media, whatever, but there's a trust factor that I have built up with certain people. And when I get out there and say, hey, it's real, my son has it, people start looking at things a little bit different, right? And I understand that, there are a lot of people right now who, throughout this whole period, knew they had COVID, right? Had symptoms, knew they had COVID, couldn't smell, couldn't taste, body aches, flu-like symptoms and stuff like that, but didn't want to get tested. And even if they did get tested, didn't want to let anybody know that they had the disease, right? Because if you end up with COVID, the perception is that there's a level of irresponsibility at some point, right? You didn't wear the mask when you should have. You didn't wash your hands when you should have. You weren't using hand sanitizer or gloves in the moment when you should have, right? And so because of that, you succumbed to the virus. And a lot of people don't want to admit that they got caught lacking out here by Corona, right? So they'll just kind of stay home. They'll separate from people, and which was easy to do when we couldn't go anywhere anyway, right? And so, so it's been a really, really interesting time in this country for a lot of people, just trying to figure out how to navigate these waters, so to speak, and then having to actually deal with the reality of catching this disease, making sure you don't purposely give it to someone else, but I mean, all in all, we've done good. I just got tested. I got tested twice last week because Dave Chappelle was in town. And in order to go to the Dave Chappelle show, you had to get tested, right? So for me, it's like, well, I'm going to go and see Dave and everything, but it's actually a good opportunity to get tested just to be sure. I'd been tested before and came up negative, but I was like, it doesn't hurt to get tested now. And then when you're in these environments where everyone has been tested in the moment and everyone is negative, then you can kind of relax, right? We're not walking on eggshells at this point, right? Like in the backstage area, we all actually, because everybody tested negative, you can kind of take your mask off and talk to people like you would normally talk to people and hang with people. And this was on the Thursday of Jeezy versus Gucci. So it was a really exciting time backstage during the concert. We're all kind of tuned in to Verzuz and stuff like that. But, and like we're basically watching it on a phone. This government will not actively promote ideas, legislation, reform for people of color, specifically Black people in this country, without being forced to do it, right? Like America's not gonna wake up one day and acknowledge its complicity in systemic racism, right? That's far from a government aspect, right? It's complicity in systemic racism, it's complicity in oppression, suppression, all of these different things that have been done to create roadblocks for people of color in this country trying to get to the same level of equality as white people, right? So anytime the rights of the citizen have been either reclaimed or redirected to benefit the citizen, it's only because of citizens standing up to be heard, right? So the government doesn't necessarily look over the law of the land and purposely make reforms that benefit us just because it's a wrong that's being done, right? We have to scream that it's a wrong, that we've been wronged in these circumstances, and that change must happen, right? And it has to be very strong demands. It has to be very loud demands. There has to be a disruption of normalcy on some level. The least of it tends to be, you'll see a group of people, doing sit-ins in government buildings or disrupting traffic on interstates, right? That's like the low end of it. Obviously, the higher end, the further end of it is when you see structural damage, like looting, that kind of stuff. And all these things, whether you agree with them or not, cause change to occur, right? And it's funny that whenever we talk about looting in this country and rioting in this country, it's always from the perspective of people of color committing these acts. No one really talks about the hundreds of acts of rioting and looting through Black communities in their earliest days of formation, right? From the 1800s up until maybe the mid 2000s, right? I mean, mid 1900s. It's funny how it's always framed when we commit these acts, but there's no accountability for what happened in Tulsa, right? Black Wall Street, things of that nature. I'm not one to, although it wouldn't be my course of action, right? I don't denounce people that choose to act out in that way, right? We like to talk about, look at Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Like the whole idea that he decided that it was necessary for him to cross state lines with a weapon he's not old enough to possess to protect the property of people he doesn't even know, right? Like lawfully, legally, you have the right to protect your property, right? So if people were in Kyle Rittenhouse's yard, right, knocking on his door, threatening him in that manner, or at his place of business, which he's a 17, 18-year-old kid, he doesn't have a place of business, then yeah, I could see a situation where excessive force might be justified in that moment, right? If there's an actual threat upon your person or your property, right? I've dealt with that, right? The threat of someone on my property, right? So I totally understand that. But I can't leave Houston and go to New Orleans, right? Because my friend Derek has a sneaker store there and they might do something to his store, right? I'm not justified in protecting someone else's property. And so, just this whole idea of that we need to go out and combat the rioters and the looters. Look, I have friends that own businesses that have been looted, right? I talked to Don C in Chicago, right? When they looted RSVP Gallery. And, my whole thing is, man, I hate that this happened to your store, right? I hate that, this happened to you in the moment, but I'm sure you see what's happening. And Don was like, look, if taking things from my store would have helped ease the pain of people dealing with police brutality in this country, right? He says, I would have opened the doors and given it to them, right? Like, I have no problem supporting them in that effort, understanding their pain, wanting to help them deal with the trauma of these acts. So he's like, if that's what it would have taken for, you know, somebody to come in and take some Bape shirts or, you know, a couple of Mastermind tees or something like that, or a pair of sneakers or something, he's like, I would have opened the doors. I talked to Sean Witherspoon in LA about round 2 and stuff like that, you know, and people are like, look, we can replace property. We're dealing with loss of life, right? That's the real issue. So most of these business owners are not necessarily throwing pity parties. Not all of them, because I understand that for some people, it's a lot harder for them to rebuild. And I get that, right? But I mean, not all business owners are like, man, this is wrong, this isn't right. The real wrong in America is the police brutality, is these crimes of violence acted out against people of color in this country. If we don't have that, then there's no reason to riot or loot. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, people look at Minneapolis and they want to talk about the Target. We're not going to feel bad for Target. Target's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? And a lot of people don't know what happened was in Minneapolis when people were protesting, they were in the area of the Target and tried to go into Target for refreshments, for water, chips, snacks, and stuff like that while they were out. And Target wouldn't let them in. So that's basically Target sending a signal that we don't stand with you in this moment. And so that's why people reacted the way that they did to that particular Target, right? But Minneapolis has been a hotbed of police brutality for a while. And the reason the city reacted in the way that it did in terms of George Floyd's murder is that they were fed up, right? This was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And it was like, we can't take it. You know, they're consistently doing this. And then the officers that commit these crimes against us continue to police our neighborhoods. So when the police cars drive by, I don't see police officers, I see murderers, right? Stalking my neighborhood. That's how the local community looked at it. And there's a lot of communities that feel the same way as far as these things are concerned. And so I feel like, you know, we have to be adamant about this level of reform, right? About policies that protect people in their communities in terms of police relations, police escalation, and all of that. Like, people, they want to act like, okay, well, we don't need to defund the police. We just need to get them the proper training. They already get that training, right? You know, the level of escalation that's allowed in the moment, right? The need for cutting on your body cam, right? Policing in neighborhoods of color with people that you don't necessarily look like. They get training for that. It's about whether or not they choose to embrace that training and apply it in the moment. And unfortunately, not enough of them do. So we have to continuously hold the powers that be accountable, regardless of who's in the White House. Because as positive as I feel about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's administration, I don't feel strongly that they're going to prioritize the need for that level of reform. Joe Biden has already said that he doesn't believe in defunding the police, right? Much less dismantling the police. And so those are things that we're going to have to push for and fight for with this present administration, you know what I'm saying, who many of us supported getting in office, right? I do believe that we'll be afforded a seat at the table to have these conversations and try to find, you know, all we want is a level of negotiation, right? What are you willing to accept and what won't you accept, right? And then we can kind of go back and forth over what we can actively apply on a national basis, right? Because that's my thing. There's always going to be state laws and localized city laws in terms of these things. But to have like a blanket level of reform sent out by the government, right, by the administration starting in 2021 would do a lot to help push this forward. I don't think it's something they're going to do right out of the gate, because obviously that priority in America right now from a government standpoint is COVID and then the economy, right? But once we've rebounded from the infection rate, right? Once we've rebounded in terms of getting local businesses, small businesses reopened, getting people back to work, right? Trying to get back to a level of normalcy that people can can live by, right? And continue to prosper in this great country. We're gonna have to keep up the fight. I mean, it's just that simple, you know? It was just the fact of Trump being so bigoted in his views, so racist in his views, and basically being complicit in the conversation that people are having in regards to not allowing Black bodies to live peacefully in this country, right? That was a big problem. So it's like, look, this guy isn't trying to hear what we're talking about. He basically represents the other side of the argument. So we just need to replace him with somebody who is willing to have these conversations, hear us out, and potentially do something. And if they choose not to act, then we'll know very early on that there's a need for a better administration. And once these candidates start presenting themselves, probably it's going to be in maybe 2023, right? Like that's the time when like an Ice Cube submits his contract for Black America, right? While people are actively running, so that someone can say, you know what, if I embrace this, I recognize this as essential for life for Black people and people of color in this country. So if you elect me as president, I will enact this, that kind of a thing, right? I think that the reason that they weren't necessarily receptive to Ice Cube is because they didn't feel they needed to be, right? They felt that Trump was enough to make Black people vote for Biden, right? That they didn't need any other inherent reasoning as to why they should not vote the incumbent back into office, right? But I do feel that the things that Ice Cube presented needs to be addressed at some point, right? And if people are willing to accept these things and try to enact 7 out of 10 points, let's say 7 out of 10 points, right? Then we realize that this administration is not going to benefit us in that way, and that we need to start putting our power and weight and our vote and our voice behind people in this country who will look to enact some of these things and help to push Black people over this set of hurdles, you know, and give us a more equal place and a more equal chance of life in America, of getting to that American dream that we all always want to talk about America has and values. I think the problem is that the Trump administration tried to make it look as if Ice Cube was working with them, as opposed to Ice Cube presenting something to them, right? Now, the reality is that if you want change, you do have to negotiate with the powers that be, right? But there's no need to go into a negotiation with people who are not going to hear you out and actively do something about what you're negotiating about, right? So there's a difference between a presentation and a negotiation, right? So what Ice Cube did was present something to the administration to look for a place where a negotiation was possible, right? Were they even open to negotiating these points, right? And if not, then we'll go to the other side. And if neither side wants to negotiate these points, then it's time for us to start looking to put someone into power that will, right? I think the timing was the issue for a lot of people. I saw that in terms of Ice Cube and like people like Diddy, coming into the conversation when the majority of presidential candidates for the Democratic Party had already been eliminated, right? If this is something that you want the next administration to consider, then I think it's something that you approach at an earlier place. Now, I don't knock the idea of doing it, right? Like, I think it was a bold gesture by Ice Cube. I think that he knew at some point that there would be blowback from it, pushback from it, right? And people kind of pointing the finger, right? Most people, if you don't know who Ice Cube is at this point and whether that Ice Cube gives a fuck about how you feel, then that's on you. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why anyone is surprised by Ice Cube actually wanting these things for Black people, and willing to talk to whoever he needed to talk to do it. Because in his mind, he doesn't give a fuck who puts Black people in the best position to prosper, as long as they put Black people in a position to prosper, right? And that's how we should be, right? I think a lot of people got offended because of the way that representatives of the administration, with the tweets and everything, saying we're so happy to have sat with Ice Cube to talk about our platinum plan. This was about them perverting the narrative, right? And subverting the narrative to benefit them with people of color and Black people in this country, right? They didn't give a damn about the way Ice Cube ended up being perceived by those same people. You know, I support someone like Ice Cube trying to use his platform and his level of influence to bring about change for Black people. That's kind of been part of his agenda for a while. You know, he's very close with the minister, Honorable Minister Farrakhan, as well as super informed people like a Chuck D, who are very active and have always been active in this space. And so I commend Ice Cube for doing it. You know, I supported it fully, but I could understand how, based off the way certain people tweeted about this, where people could be like, oh no, Ice Cube fucking with Trump. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I think anybody that really knows Ice Cube knows that. But it's very easy for people to voice these very skewed opinions through social media, right? Like nobody's gonna run up to Ice Cube and be like, yo, that's fucked up, you working with Trump. Nobody's gonna do that, right? But like I tell people, it's like, it's funny to me that people have the audacity to try to wait till this moment to try to prove they're tough to Ice Cube, right? Because Ice Cube's gonna keep on doing whatever it is he feels he needs to do in order to help Black people, whether or not all Black people agree with him or not. Because all Black people haven't agreed with him up to this point. So there's no need for him to stop now. He's not here to please every Black person. He's here to initiate change that helps to benefit every Black person. And when you do these things, it's not always understood in the moment. So I understand how there could be a concerted effort to subvert Ice Cube's message and Ice Cube's effort, right, to look us another way. Look, I'm not here to make excuses for anybody, right? That whatever Wayne chooses to do with his life, that's on him, and he has to deal with the ramifications of these actions. I do feel like money was a part of it, because 50 Cent came out afterwards and talked about how the Trump campaign offered him $1 million to come out in support of him. So I could see them making these different phone calls to different individuals. I think Rich the Kid spoke about how they wanted to send a private plane and bring him out or whatever. So I could see them trying to cater to egos or pockets in order to get, like, they were willing to do anything they could to repurpose the Black vote in their favor, because they understand that the only reason that things have been going the way they have been going with this country is because they've been able to eliminate the Black vote. It's always been understood that when Black people choose to vote, the elections tend to go in their favor, right? And so when they saw that Black people were coming out in record numbers, right, getting registered, sending in early voting, being prepared to push other people to get involved, right? All these different initiatives from Black people to get Black people involved in this election. They were like, well, if Black people are going to vote, because for them, the best thing is that Black people not vote, right? Disenfranchise the Black voter completely, right? Keep them away from the polls at all costs. But if they are going to go to the polls, let's try to find a reason that would allow them to even consider voting for us. And because they don't have true frames of reference with Black people, Black culture, and the Black experience in this country, the first thing they can do is, hey, let's get some rappers behind us, right? Now, I love Lil Wayne as an artist, I love him as a person, but Lil Wayne is not informed enough to speak on these type of things, right? You could look at Lil Pump on the stand at the Trump rally, right? Most of them in there, I would say probably 85% of the people in there had no idea who he was, right? And he didn't have any idea of the issues or anything. He gets up there and, Sleepy Joe and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't really understand how politics work in this country, right? He saw an opportunity to be out there, to be seen. And, look, if he likes Trump, that's him, but he has to understand that a large part of his base don't agree with him. That's why it's important for entertainers to be very careful whenever they speak out about certain things, particularly when it deals with race and politics in this country. It's for your own good that you really, really only speak about things that you care about, right? Because there's a very good chance that you could be vilified publicly and lose your standing with your base if you make the wrong decision and come out for or against the wrong issues, depending on where the majority of people who look up to you, support you, or look at you as a person of influence feel. I don't think they really took that into consideration when they did these things. And if they did, then that should tell you a lot about how some of these artists feel about you, right? So yeah, I mean, look, I don't look for policy information from Lil Wayne or Lil Pump, right? Those are not the people I would go to, even if I was young and part of their core fan base. Like, I'm a big fan of Lil Wayne. I've known him since he's about 14 years old. I've watched his whole growth in this world, and he's been amazing in terms of his artistry, right? We're not going to take that away from him, but I don't think he has the knowledge and wherewithal to really even enter into this discussion. I mean, everybody can have an opinion, but I just think that he put himself in a position of criticism, right? And just outright people just going for his head, coming for his head because of this, you know? A lot of people Wayne is very important to Black culture, right? Lil Wayne as an artist, his music, his legacy is very important to Black culture and has very deep resonation with a lot of Black people. But they're not gonna put that before the needs of their community, the needs of their family, and the needs of Black people in America, right? So if Black people got to choose between police reform, the destruction of systemic racism, and policies that help benefit Black people in this country, they're not gonna put Lil Wayne in front of that. You know, because there's a lot of other music we could listen to. I think people are starting to forget that people have a choice. And when you do these things, you put people in the position of having to make a choice. And when it comes to the betterment of Black people, very few of us are going to win against that, if any of us. The Trump administration know exactly who the entertainers are that are active in their communities in this country. The problem is that the majority of those people who are active in that space are against him, right? So, and when he decides to bring these people in, he has to make it seem as if these people are more highly regarded in this space than they really are, right? So the idea of calling Lil Wayne an activist is only to tell the people that support him, look, this guy is active in the community, but he's active on our side, right? Like that's the message that's being sent out to people. So, I mean, look, it's all a subversion, right? It's all about painting a picture and presenting something in the way that you want it to be presented. I'm on the front lines. People like Trader Truth are on the front lines. Mr. Rogers on the front lines. Steven Jackson on the front lines. My son on the front lines. We don't take offense to that because we know these people deal in misinformation, right? So the idea of putting Lil Wayne next to the president is all about subversion, right? We see subversion tactics on every level, on a localized level, a state level, on a national level, and if you really look at it, on an international level, right? So we don't get caught up in that because that's really designed to pit Black man against Black man and take the attention off of the oppressor, right? So we're not gonna fall for the banana in the tailpipe. We're gonna keep directing things at you. At the same time, we would hope to get to someone like a Lil Wayne and impress upon him the need to not do that, right? But Wayne's been very like anti-Black Lives Matter, right? There's a history of him speaking out like against Black Lives Matter and not really moving in this space and having a concern to move in this space. So when people who don't carry our same concerns speak opposing opinions to our concerns, we disregard these people. And I think that's what's happening with people like Lil Wayne. I think Ice Cube inadvertently is getting grouped into this, right? But I mean, we'll work that out. Like Ice Cube's gonna be okay, right? Like Ice Cube's gonna be fine. He's okay. It's not gonna hurt his feelings if people decide not to fuck with him anymore. That's not gonna be a problem for Cube. But I think it could potentially be a point of concern for people like Lil Wayne. We don't take these kind of distractions, right? Like, I'm not gonna stop doing everything I'm doing to diss Lil Pump. It's not what I'm here for, right? We're focused, we're staying on message, and we're going to continue speaking out against these things, irregardless of who chooses to be with us or against us. Neither one is gonna stop us. You wanna roll with us, cool. If not, cool. We're still going where we're going. I feel like there's this overt level of criticism against her record as a DA, right? We concentrate on some of the things that we don't agree with, but there are a lot of things that she initiated in the Bay Area that I do agree with, right? Like second chance programs. So there was programs set up, and Kamala Harris did this, to where when young people committed crimes and had charges, they were allowed second chances to get this stuff off of their record, right? So that they could still go out in the world and not having bad decisions they made at young people follow them throughout their life, right? And now obviously there's a limit to what we can do, right? Like, you can't just be out here shooting people and murdering people, right? Actively, right? There's young people make bad decisions, trying to break in someone's car, break in someone's house, shoplifting, that kind of stuff, right? Like, these are immature decisions that people make, right? A lot of them are spur of the moment decisions that people make. But when you're actively involved in a life of crime, right? And there's a pattern of behavior that you've been exhibiting, right? And it's not your first offense, right? The second chance program is only for first time offenders, right? Of a certain grade of crime, right? So I'm sure your misdemeanor had to be a certain class, your felony had to be a certain class for you to even be considered for these things, right? But if you're a black prosecutor, a black DA or whoever, there's going to be black people that you have to send to jail, right? And to not acknowledge this is foolish, right? There's kids who make bad decisions, and then there are bad people, right? And we have to learn how to differentiate between those people, right? Now, prison is supposed to be a place where you can reform, but obviously we need to reform the entire prison system, because we're not really rehabilitating anybody actively, right? The opportunity to take certain classes and get GEDs, they're limited at best. And so we need to be able to rearrange this prison system from being a for-profit system, which it is turning into, right? Private prison industry, the prison industrial complex, right? We need to take that hands out of the way of people who operate prisons for profit, because when a business is for profit, you're going to do whatever it takes to make money. In terms of prison industrial complex, the only way you can make money is if you send people to jail, if you make sure that the prison stays full, right? So we've got to consistently raise concerns about that. But getting back to Kamala Harris, no, I'm not concerned at all. I think she's up for the task. I think she recognizes being a woman of color, woman of Black descent, Jamaican descent, as well as Asian descent, right? That she represents a lot of people and speaks to a lot of people. I think she's going to be in a higher position of power, obviously, as vice president than she was as a district attorney and a prosecutor and stuff like that. I'm sorry, not district, but prosecutor. And so we are going to make sure, right, that we impress upon her the need to, look, you can't change what you've done, right? But the power of the vice presidency affords you the ability to help push legislation, to meet with people across the aisle, right? Not just Democrats, but Republicans as well, and present legislation that affords Black people and people of color the opportunity to live, to work, to prosper in this country without there being hindrance based off of their color or their gender or their race or whatever it may be, or their religion for that matter. I feel confident that that's something that she's going to want to get accomplished. But I can understand there being criticism for some of the things that she's done in her past. That comes with the job, right? It's a thankless job in certain ways. But I don't think any of that is going to stop her from doing what she needs to do in the office. But if she doesn't do what she needs to do in the office, we vote them out. It's just that simple, right? It's not often that an incumbent is beat by a new candidate, but it's absolutely possible, right? if we can prove to the majority of people that voted this administration into power based off of things that they presented throughout all their rallies, you know, throughout all of their interviews, throughout the debates, right? We have to hold them to that, right? Because you can't just say these things in order to get our votes. You can't just say this thing in order to have our voice and our power behind you. And if they don't do it, then we're going to be very, very loud and adamant about them. You know, you got to draw a line in the sand. You're either with us or against us. I mean, it's something that at this point I have to consider because there's so many people, you know, talking to me about it. And I understand what it takes to win an office, right? To win a political position, you know, whether it's local, state, or nationally. And so because of the fact that I do have the awareness of what the community wants, right? I have the connection with the community for them to be able to come to me and tell me what it is that they feel they need. And I have quite honestly, the popularity that it takes to win a public office. You have to consider it, right? I have to take into consideration that if like our mayor Sylvester Turner in Houston is a great mayor. I think he's done great things in the city. He's also been a state representative. He's been on city council. So he's been a part of a lot of great things in terms of helping the city. This is his last term though, right? So if there isn't someone that he's going to recommend to replace him, right, and throw his support behind, if there's going to be someone that we don't feel has the city's best interests, then it's something I gotta have to consider. Like I've had someone tell me, like, you know, if you don't run for mayor after Sylvester's last term, this person is going to run for mayor. They already have the funding, right? They've already run before but lost, but now they have the name notoriety in the city. And if you don't run, that person becomes mayor. That's something I have to weigh that, right? I have to weigh that, even though it's not necessarily something. I don't think you should run for mayor because you can, right? I think you should run for these elected offices because you care, right? Because if I just ran for something because I felt I could, there's a number of offices that I could run for and potentially win. I could definitely win a city council seat. That's not even a question. I could definitely win for a comptroller or a county clerk or any of these different type of things. I even feel like if I ran in the right county, I could win a state rep seat, right? But is that really where I want to be? Is that really what I want to do, right? That's something that you have to really consider, right? So I have to weigh the pros as well as the cons. And keep in mind, if I become the mayor of Houston, I'm not rapping, right? Like I can't do concerts, right? Because I can't be in Nashville at some festival getting ready to go on stage and then get a call that a firefighter died in the line of duty, a police officer died in the line of duty, right? Because it's my job, for one, to contact the families, give them the bad news, but it's also my job, let's say a cop is murdered, right? It's my job to let the people in the city know that we're going to find this murderer, take them off the streets, right? If a cop kills a citizen, it's my job to call that family and let them know that we're going to do everything we can to find if someone's accountable for this murder and it's not justified, right? It's not a justifiable use of deadly force. We've got to hold that officer accountable. So there's a lot of different things that you got to navigate, and running off trying to do a second job is not going to allow me to do that, right? Like we get so mad when we see Trump golfing on the weekend, when people have real concerns, when people are dying in this country. I wouldn't want my city to have a spout of violence or whatever, and I'm in Miami for Art Basel. Like, you know what I'm saying? Or I went to Rolling Loud or some shit like that. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So I've got to weigh all of that in terms of deciding whether or not I want to run for public office. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that there isn't an active consideration. I mean, we're literally looking to put together an exploratory committee about it, right? And so, I mean, it's something we're talking about, but I mean, we'll see. I don't want to say no, but I'm definitely not saying yeah right now, because you never know. No, I still get so much out of it. I love being a part of the culture. And there are artists who are 10, 15, 20 years older than me who are still actively out here rapping. I'm on a song right now with that K Slay put together Melly Mel is on the song. Grandmaster Caz is on the song. Ice-T is on the song. So these people are, you know, older than me, right? They're the generation before me, yet they're still active in the culture. Now, for people like an Ice Cube or an Ice-T, it's not their mainstream of revenue, right? But no matter how much money Ice-T makes from Law and Order, no matter how much money Ice Cube makes from the Big Three, right? They never drop the mic. You know, and I remember when people like Too Short used to always say, I'm retiring, and then 2 years later they put out an album. I don't want to be contradictory like that, right? Like, as long as people appreciate what I do and the level of execution I have in terms of my art, I'm gonna do that. Will it always be full albums, promo tours, and all of that stuff? Maybe not, right? But I'm not ready to put the mic down by any means. I still feel like I have some things to say. I still want to, and here's the thing, right? If ever I want someone to be the next Bun B, I have to actively support those people, right? So I have to use my platform and my level of influence to tell people, hey, if you like me and you fuck with me and the way I move, not just in the culture, but inside music, but outside music, and the way I represent the culture, then you need to really be looking at this guy, right? Because he's the younger version of me, right? And he's a smarter version of me. Whenever people try to give me a lot of accolades or whatever, I always point to Killer Mike or David Banner, right? Like, those are the next Bun Bs. Those are the guys who are really good at their art, but also have deep concerns about their community and a level of intellect that allows them to speak to those things. Dave Chappelle was in town for 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of last week. If you've seen the video that Dave posted to his page about the Netflix situation, right? I was there. I was 10 feet away from him, standing side stage while he delivered this, right? I had no idea they were filming it or anything, but it was very profound that he was, because none of us knew it. Like, when you look at the liquidity of Dave Chappelle, and this level of celebrity that Dave Chappelle has, the assumption is that everything is going his way, right? And it turns out that nothing could be further from the truth, right? And so we were all kind of taken aback, right? Like, that day, right? So the day we watched Verzuz is different from the day that we watched the Dave Chappelle show. So the day for Dave Chappelle, it was myself, Paul Wall, and Tobe. We're all together watching Dave Chappelle get up there. And in that moment, you realize that you have to consistently work to protect your art, right? That there are people out here whose job it is to profit off of art that they don't create because they're not creators, right? So it's about manipulating contracts, not allowing proper music business education, right? Or trying to find people who don't have that type of education. And of course, it's bigger than the music industry because we're talking about comedy, right? But any level of entertainment that deals in intellectual properties, right? If the people that own the label could create the content, they wouldn't need you, right? So it's their job to get the content, right? And to own the content, right? Because if they're going to make you a star and make you popular, it's going to be based off the content that you create. And that's where the money is going to come, because, you know, people are still laughing at Eddie Murphy jokes from 30 years ago, Richard Pryor jokes from 40 years ago. You know what I'm saying? George Carlin routines from 50 years ago, right? The 7 words you can't say on TV, all that kind of stuff. So you have to actively, consistently work to protect your art, right? And just knowing that something that entertains so many people, right? In the moment and still to this day, right? Like the Chappelle show is not in the hands of Dave Chappelle. It's confusing to the average person. To artists, it's disheartening, right? But so I'm always for artists letting the public know where their money is going. Because the only reason people support these things is because they believe in that effort that they're supporting you, right? So people buy your music because they believe you're gonna get the money, right? They wanna see you come up. People go and watch your movie because they believe you're gonna come up. They watch your TV show, all of these things in an effort to support you, right? And put you in a certain place of comfort, right? Or at least have you benefit from the art, right? And so when people find that stuff out, they don't understand it, right? People don't understand how contracts work and all this stuff. They think, you know, you make a song, you get paid for the song. A lot of that doesn't necessarily work like that, you know? So for one, I'm glad that Netflix recognizes in the moment that whatever money they make streaming the Chappelle show isn't worth what they could potentially lose in terms of support for Dave Chappelle on their platform and support of their platform as well, right? Now keep in mind, Netflix is paying Dave Chappelle $20 million a special, right? And so if for some reason Dave feels offended and you guys like don't act on that to erase that offense, then now Dave's like, okay, well, I'm not doing any more specials here. Let me go talk to Hulu, right? Let me go talk to Amazon Prime. I'm sure any of these people would love to have, you know, this content on their platform. But I do think it's troubling, man, that we haven't rectified these issues of intellectual properties in terms of contracts, right? So the more that artists like Dave Chappelle go out and let people know that their rights have been infringed upon by the powers that be, the less likely the next people will go into these situations not thinking to protect their properties, their names, their likenesses. He's not the first person who finds out they didn't own their name. You know, he's not the first person to find out that they didn't own their art. You know, because when you're young and you know you're in the midst of the struggle and the grind, you really just want to get on, right? So signing that contract for a lot of people is the end all be all. But once you get into the business, right, you realize that the contract is the beginning, right? This is how we decide how this thing is going to end. It doesn't end here, it starts here. And so the more awareness that artists have going into those negotiations, the better it is for artists and all, you know, for all artists, excuse me. Now, getting back to like the Gucci and Jeezy situation, this was me, Paul Wall, and Trey sitting around watching Verzuz. We're watching it on my phone. We've got my phone Bluetooth to Bumpbox, which is Trey's Bluetooth speaker company. And so we're just watching it. And for me, it's very strange because I was there like in the beginning of both of these guys, right? So like the day I do my verse for Trap or Die is the same day I do my verse for the Black T remix. Like we're all in the same studio. So like I'm in the studio recording Trap or Die, which is my second song with Jeezy. My first song was Money Over Here, right? But that was more like a feature for hire type of thing. Like my friend D Money reached out to me like, yo, this is Cat Young Jeezy in Atlanta. He's coming up musically. He wants to put you on a song. Okay, does he have a budget? Yeah, okay, this is what I charge. I do the song, right? After that, we get to know each other. We become friends. And then the next project comes up and he's like, yo, I need you on this one too. I'm like, let's do it. So I go to the studio, I lay my verse, I go out in the hallway, and Gucci's literally walking down the hallway when I go out. So we talk. He's like, yo, I'm in the other room. I'm working on this song. You know what I'm saying? I'd love to have you on this song. I'm like, let's do it, right? And so they get to know each other, right? They end up recording So Icy, produced by Zaytoven, featuring Lil Will. So I'm there literally, to my knowledge, they'd only performed that song together twice before because I was at both of those, right? But then that's when Jeezy's buzz starts to go. Def Jam wants to sign him based off So Icy. They're trying to figure out who actually owns the song because it's not necessarily Gucci featuring Jeezy or Jeezy featuring Gucci. It's Jeezy and Gucci at the time, right? And so their friendship kind of, basically that's where the friction starts. Based off who owns So Icy, they end up falling out. Shit gets deep, very street, very quickly. And so we see 15 years go by, you know, with these dudes not really even fucking with each other, like at all. We see the murder, right? The home invasion and the murder, which makes things even worse. But to see that they were actually able to put whatever issues they have with each other to the side, right? To kind of come together in that moment. As much as they did, like as crazy as it seems, I was very proud of Gucci, right? Because he's come a long way. Like there's a time where that never would have happened for a long time. I was very shocked when Swizz was like, yo, first Verzuz season 2, Gucci versus Jeezy. I'm like, you sure about that? Like, where's that gonna happen? Who's gonna be there? Do I need to come? Like, you guys are like, no, it's good. We're just gonna let it fly. We're just gonna let them see what happens, you know. And they talked about it. If I'm not mistaken, Jeezy was well aware of what Gucci's approach was going to be, right? Because I feel like they're speaking to two different people, right? Two different audiences. Like, there's three audiences, right? There's the people that love the idea of Gucci and Jeezy being in the same room together, right? And then there are people who are hesitant for Jeezy to enter that room, and there are people who are hesitant for Gucci entering that room, right? But somewhere between them, the two men, they decided that they were ready. However it was going to happen, they were ready to make it happen, right? And so everybody needed to be prepared for what was going to happen in the room, right? Jeezy showed up, typical Jeezy, right? His mannerisms, his body language, all of that is typical Jeezy. Same thing with Gucci, you know, the clothes, the jewelry, typical Gucci, right? So they went in there as themselves. They left as themselves, right? But we still got to see them share that space and actually perform Icy. You have to realize that unless you were in Atlanta at that time in those clubs, you've never seen them perform Icy together, right? And so for many people, this was like, it was groundbreaking because I can't think of any beef, any active beef, right? Like, obviously the biggest hip hop beef would have been Death Row versus Bad Boy, right? That's bigger than pretty much any rap beef we've had. But, and then obviously in current times, we see things, right, with the King Von camp versus Quando Rondo's camp and stuff like that, but we won't really get into that. Rest in peace, King Von. But as far as an active beef, where two people have beef, they're both prevalent and relevant in the culture, in the hip hop culture. But still, like, and live in the same city. That's the other thing. Like, living actively in the same city with each other. To kind of put that aside, not permanently, right? I don't think anybody walked out of there liking the other person more than they did when they walked in the room. But they were able to agree on that moment and create something that was bigger than them as individuals, bigger than their collective beefs with each other, and bigger than rap. All of those things happened in Magic City last Thursday. And I'm glad that I was able to witness it. Everything that you see in music videos today, everything you see on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, you see the guys, you know, with these big, you know, tons of money and stuff like that. I've never seen what I saw with BMF before. I've never seen it since, right? Because a lot of this stuff, like I remember specifically being in Atlanta, going to a nightclub. Now, this is a nightclub, it's not a strip club, right? This is like the Sunday night cool out spot, right? In Atlanta. I saw them throw $20,000 in that club, like in a regular nightclub for no reason. Right? So that doesn't even speak to what they would do in strip clubs in that setting, right? Like, I've seen, God, I can't even really, it's really hard to kind of put to, like, when you go to a club and you see a giraffe, you don't really know how to take that. Right? Like, Meech's birthday party at the compound is probably the craziest thing I would ever personally bore witness to. Right? Because there's animals, like, it's not just a giraffe, like there's a monkey, right? There's some other shit. But I had never seen a giraffe before in person. Right? And I wasn't expecting to see one at a nightclub. So it's the craziest shit. It was never like I never saw Meech doing what Meech did in those times was never like, fuck these niggas, I'm gonna show these niggas how we do it. It was never like that, right? It was like, it was more like a, God, how do I explain? Meech's life was like an infomercial, right? It was like, we're balling, you can be balling too, right? Like, everybody's woman is taken care of, everybody's kids is in a good school. Like, you know what I'm saying? If you're a woman and you like a man, whatever kind of man you like, we got him. You like a tall guy, we got him. You got like a short guy, we got him. You like skinny guys, we got him. You like fat guys, we got him, right? Anything you could want, and they all got money. So you just pick whoever you want, because we all got money. We all take care of our kids. We're gonna take care of your kids too if you got them and you riding with us. It was insane. Like every time was insane, but Meech was very, I don't really have a word to describe him, right? To be so much larger than life and be down to earth at the same time, right? And it was never about Meech. It was always about us, right? BMF was not designed to make Meech the big man, right? For all of us, but it was based on how Meech moved and bringing, like BMF was composed of people from all around the country, right? So there's Detroit people, obviously, because Meech is from Detroit. There's Chicago people, there's St. Louis people, there's California people, New York people, Florida people, and of course, Georgia people. And it was really about a show of unity. Like if you're out here in this life, everybody ain't your enemy. Like there's a way for all of us to get money together, to come up together. He tried to show street unity, which really didn't exist in that level, right? On that level. And it was just something to witness. I mean, my wife talks about it all the time. Like every time I'd be like, yo, Meech is doing this, you should come down to this. She would come, she'd be petrified, right? Because my wife understands the streets. My wife is from the hood. And she was like, I don't feel like safe. She said, not from them, but I know them people are watching. I'm like, yeah, they're watching. They're definitely, everywhere we're gonna go this weekend, they'll be there, right? Like, they'll be there. But I'm not here to sell, I'm not doing anything illegal, right? I'm just a rapper. So don't worry about that. You know what I'm saying? Because there's not gonna be any film or any pictures where I'm in a room with money or drugs. So we're good, we're rappers, right? As long as you act like who you are, right? Stay in that space, you'll be fine. If you try to pretend you're doing more with this group of people than you are, that's when problems are gonna arise. So she eventually started to find a level of comfort. And a lot of people don't know, Meech was on his way to my birthday party when he went to jail. So Meech was arrested in Dallas. Meech was on his way to Houston for my birthday party. Because he was like, you always with us when we party for our birthdays, we coming to party with you. So we coming to show Houston how BMF get down. And I was like really excited for people to see it in person. Because I come home and I try to explain it to people. And this is before the proliferation of camera phones and video and stuff like that. So there wasn't really a lot of proof. Like we would be in Miami, right? And Meech's like, we're going to the club tonight. So they'll call the club and be like, yo, we don't need a section, we need the stage. There's no section that can hold us. So we need the stage, right? And we want 100 bottles of champagne, right? 20 bottles of vodka, 20 bottles of tequila, all of this stuff, right? For the section. Sometimes the club would be like, well, we only got 50 bottles for the whole club, right? Like we've only got 50 bottles of champagne for everybody. All right, don't worry. I'm gonna send somebody over there with the bottles. Just have them cold when we get there. Like I'd seen bottle service before, but I'd never seen sparklers before, right? I never saw that level of presentation. And to just see this endless stream of people, like it would be like a 5-10 minute thing for them to get all the bottles there, right? Because there's only so many bottle girls in the club, right? So let's say you got 8 girls working, each one of them's got 2 bottles in their hands. That's only 16. We still got another 84 bottles. And that's just champagne, right? And each one of these bottles has a sparkler. So the club is lit up now at this point with this whole idea of what's happening. And then after that, I saw it, but I'd never seen like bottles and sparklers and this whole like big presentation before that moment. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but I'd never seen it before. And there's been things like I've seen Drake in Houston for Houston Appreciation Weekend. I've seen a lot of money. Like I've seen him with a lot of money, right? In the moment. But that's all his money, right? When BMF used to do it, that wasn't just Meech's money, right? That's J-Bo's money. That's Big Cuz money. You know what I'm saying? That's all these different people. So it was amazing to see, right? And then like there'd be times when, let's say this guy only has 50 grand. Hey man, like somebody will tap you, Mike Meech will tap you. Hey, tell so-and-so, man, I need another 30. And then another guy would just have 30 grand on him and send it over. Like everybody had enough money for anything, right? And I mean, you just don't see that level of unity. You know what I'm saying? Because the crazy thing about BMF, like, yeah, there were snitches involved, there were people, but they were never from the core. Nobody in that core group, right, did anything out of pocket from what I saw. Now, it could be different, I don't know, but everybody that I saw that was in that core group of BMF members, like captains in that unity, they all stayed down. They all stayed solid. And we still say free Big Meech, BMF for life. Because there's not a lot of proof for this stuff, it's hard for people to believe. But everything you heard about them that seemed like there's no way, there was a way. there was really a way. People keep asking for that. My conversation with Swiss was about UGK versus A-Ball and MJG. It's the people that are now asking for UGK and Outkast, right? But I had talked to Ball and G when Verzuz first started about, hey man, if they start, because at first it was just producers, right? This whole concept comes from the idea of beat battles, right? And so when they were first doing producers and they were starting to move into artists, I was like, I remember Paul saying that he wanted to do 3-6 for Mafia versus Bone, right? And he put it out there, and Swiss was like, okay, we'll consider that. You know, let's put that down and figure out when and how we can make that happen. And so in that time, I reached out and I was like, look, man, I reached out to Ball and G. I was like, hey, would y'all want to do this? And they really didn't know, because this was a very new concept. So I explained exactly what it was. And Ball was like, man, I trust your judgment. If you think this is a good thing for us to do, I'm with it. Let's do it. And so I reached out to Swizz, and Swizz was like, I love it. Let's do it. And so we're still moving on that, right? Like UGK versus A-Ball and MJG. Now, if another versus presents itself, I'm open to it. You know, my preference would be obviously to do the one that we already talked about. But if the people say that, well, we really feel like this is a better one, then we'll do it. The record company sent us out to go do the photo shoot. And so I feel like I'm sweating on that cover. I might not have been, but it was super hot day. And the guy, like, everything he wanted to do was outside. So we kept getting a little bit more and more pissed about that, shooting everything outside. And then we just ended up like pulling over on the side of the road, and there was a gate and railroad tracks. And he was like, we want to shoot here. And we were like, yo, we shoot here. This is it. We're not shooting shit else. Like this is it, you know? And so we went, we did that cover. And if you look, you can kind of see my irritation in the moment, because he's like, I want to do a low shot. And at this point, I'm at the heaviest I've been in my life, right? Like if I wasn't 300 in that picture, I was 300 pounds probably a week later. Like that's how close I was. I was really out of shape, was really hot, and it was torture for me. And I was like, look, I don't want to fucking do this. And after we shot the group of pictures that became the album cover, I was done. We're like, we're done for the day. I'm not gonna walk around here sweating. You want to shoot some more shit? We can shoot it tonight, or we can go to some kind of studio and shoot it. But I ain't shooting shit out, because it's Texas. It's summertime. It's hot as shit. You know. But it was. I mean, we were very like proud of the idea that our first like national album was getting ready to come out, but we had no idea what went into it, right? Like the preparation and promotion, the art direction, all of that type of stuff. So that was like a very, very big life lesson we had to learn that day out in the Dallas sun. You know, Pimp had an illness when he was younger. He had an autoimmune deficiency when he was younger. He eventually overcame it. But when he was younger, he ended up having to be homeschooled. So his entire junior year of high school, he was homeschooled. And then going into his senior year, which is when this happened, because I had already graduated, he was still in high school. And he was literally like not wanting to do anything. He was like, I'm done with school. I'm just gonna do this music shit. Like he was like, I'm not worried about a plan B. It's music or nothing for me. And we just didn't want him to pigeonhole himself into a situation that didn't allow him to have a plan B or prepare for whether or not, because we didn't know if this was gonna work at the time, And so for me, I was like, I'm gonna take a year off, right? I had opportunities to go to college. I turned them down in order to rap, but I was like, I'll take a year off, right, from going to college. They call it a gap year now, And I was like, we'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, I'll retake my ACT, my college entry exam here, and just kind of go back to what it was going to be before I fell in love with music. The way it turned out, like I ended up signing with a major record company like a week before that year deadline. So all worked itself out. But my thing was like, you always want to leave yourself with opportunities, right? You can put all your heart, all your passion, and all your effort into something, and it doesn't mean it's still going to happen, right? So you always have to be prepared for that stuff and have something to fall back on. So for me, like, which is crazy, sounds crazy, but for me, going to college was my fallback, right? And so with Pimp, he didn't really have one. And I it wasn't just me, it was the guy that owned a record company too. He's like, and you have to keep in mind, Pimp was an introvert at this time. This is not the Pimp C that we all see and know right now. He was a very reserved person, wasn't really an outside kind of guy, just really like staying home and making music, And so we kind of wanted to keep him centered around that, right? And it worked for about 3-4 years. And then probably around 95, 96, he just, like, I don't want to be inside anymore. I want to be outside. You know what I'm saying? I want to go out and enjoy this notoriety that I have. Like, I have this earned privilege through what I'm doing, and I want to go and try to enjoy some of it, right? And he ended up there, okay, I like the way this feels. This is where I'm going to be. So that's kind of when I started to show more reservation about things and kind of pull back, because I was the wild one in our younger years, Luckily, there's no video or pictures of that kind of stuff, right? But I was the wilder one, right? Smoking angel dust and shit like that, riding around with illegal guns and stuff. And then when he decided he wanted to go outside and be outside, as we say now, I was like, well, both of us can't be out here wilding. That's not going to work, right? And I've been wilding for the last 4 or 5 years. So if he decides it's his turn to come out, then I'm going to go in. And so that's kind of how the dynamic shifts. And unfortunately, this is when the eyes tend to center on us. And this is the only idea of UGK that most people have. So you really have to be like a day one person, right? To really know how that dynamic shifts at a certain point. This was a domestic issue, right? Between a couple. And so most people tend to stay out of those. Those things can get very touchy. There's a lot of instances where people will insert themselves into these situations, right? Like trying to defend a woman in an abusive relationship. And you do all that, you put yourself in harm's way to defend this woman, and then the woman, for one reason or another, goes back to that same relationship, right? So people are more and more hesitant to even insert themselves into those situations. And even less so when we're dealing with Black women, right? Black women is probably the least protected human being on the planet, right? But Black women throw themselves in the line of fire for their men, their families, and their community time and time and time again, right? So anytime there's a movement or an initiative to help better the Black conditions in this country, Black women are on the front line, always on the front line. And so we have to make sure that we are standing up and supporting and defending our Black women. Because if Black men don't say, don't touch our Black women, white men and white women will do and act however they feel or choose against our women. And those days are done, right? Those days are done. Like, we're not going to stand for that anymore. Black women are essential and vital to the Black family, the Black community, and to women in general, right? It's very important that they be heard, they be seen, they be respected, and they be protected. And to go even deeper with Megan, like, you know, my wife was friends with Megan's father, right? And so when we've been around Megan, like, my wife has been in a position to kind of tell her things about her father that she maybe didn't know, because her father died when she was very young. He was murdered. And I let her know, like, you know, as you move through hip hop, things can get crazy every now and then. If you find yourself in one of these crazy situations, don't worry about it. We will protect you. Like, you know, I'm an elder in the city, we're gonna protect you. So if you got some issues out here, don't concentrate on it, don't focus on it too much. Just keep doing what it is you need to do. Now, I understand her need to vocalize her concerns with reference to this Tory Lanez situation, right? Because it speaks to the larger issue at hand, particularly in the moment when looking at the Breonna Taylor situation. And I just, you know, normally I don't get involved with other people's situations, but because of my relationship with her, who I am in the city, and what I told her I would do, I felt it was only right for me to speak up on her behalf in that moment. You know, and a lot more people, I mean, people are usually waiting for that first person to say something, and then more and more people will step to the table. But I feel like if I hadn't said anything, I'm not sure how much people would have even spoken on this issue, right? And if, you know, my relationship with Tory Lanez is damaged, then so be it. You know, we have to protect our Black men, and any Black man, our Black women, and any Black man that doesn't feel the same way is not my brother. While I respect anyone's right to defend themselves, right? Because keep in mind, this is a criminal case, right? And so he does have the legal right to defend himself in court, and that's fine. But in terms of releasing music, I think it was just poor timing, and he really didn't read the room. I don't think it'll be easy for him to do shows many places, right? But hell, people still went to R. Kelly concerts, so I can't really say what people will and won't do. You would like to believe and have hope that 2021 is going to be better. But I look at a lot of old footage from 2019, and we were very ready to be done with 2019. Like, we were literally saying, I'm over 2019, 2020, bring it on. In retrospect, I think we all would have loved to have maybe 4 or 5 more months in 2019 than going into 2020. I mean, but you always have to have hope that it's going to get better, right? Whether or not I actually think it's going to get better, I'm not sure. But I think if we all actively work to make 2021 a better year, right? And a big part of that was this election, right? So I think as long as we make the effort to do better and to go further, right? And to lift each other up in this world, not just in America, but in the world in general, we put ourselves in a better position to have a better year next year. But it's going to take everybody to turn everything around, because there's been so much damage to the connectivity of human beings in this world right now. Like, people have been trying to find any reason to separate themselves from people, right? We just got to get back to this base notion that we're all human beings and that we all respect the value of life. And if we build up from there, I mean, things will inherently be better. And if they're not actually better, we're going to be better at dealing with it.